dusty frontier town of Cedar Falls buzzed with the usual activity of market day, as merchants called out their wares and families gathered supplies for the week ahead. Samuel Hayes stood at the edge of the town square, his weathered hands clutching $2 silver, watching the crowd with the quiet loneliness of a man who had spent too many years in solitude. At 35, Samuel had built a decent life for himself as a lumberjack in the hills outside town. His small cabin was sturdy, his work was honest, and he had enough money saved to live comfortably. But comfort wasn't the same as happiness, and lately the silence of his empty home had grown too heavy to bear. That's when he noticed her. A young woman sat alone near the old oak tree, partially hidden by a worn shawl that covered her head and shoulders. Her simple brown dress was patched but clean, and something about the way she held herself, so still and dignified despite her obvious poverty, caught Samuel's attention. But what truly moved him was the small hand-painted sign beside her that read, "Help needed, will work for food." Samuel had seen many people down on their luck in Cedar Falls, especially since the harsh winter had made work scarce. But there was something different about this woman, something that spoke to the loneliness in his own heart. Without overthinking it, Samuel approached her slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Excuse me, miss," he said gently, his voice carrying the soft drawl that came from years of living in these mountains. "I couldn't help but notice you might be in need of assistance." The woman looked up at him, and though he couldn't see her face clearly beneath the shawl, he could sense her wariness. "I'm looking for honest work, sir," she said quietly. "I can cook, clean, tend gardens, care for animals. I'm not asking for charity." There was a dignity in her voice that impressed Samuel, and a strength that suggested someone who had faced hardship, but refused to let it break her spirit. "Well," Samuel said, shifting his weight nervously, "I happen to need help around my place. It's just a small cabin up in the hills, but there's always work to be done, and I'm not much of a cook." The woman was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing her options. "What kind of arrangement are you proposing, sir?" "Room and board, fair wages, and respectful treatment," Samuel replied immediately. "I live alone, so there would be a separate room for you, and I give you my word as a gentleman that you'd be safe and treated with complete respect." Another pause, then she nodded slowly. "I accept your offer, Mr. Hayes, Samuel Hayes, and you are. I prefer to keep my name private for now, if that's acceptable. There are people I'd rather not find me." Samuel nodded, understanding that everyone had their reasons for privacy. "That's fine by me. Privacy is a valuable thing in these parts." As they walked together toward Samuel's wagon, he found himself stealing glances at his new companion. She moved with grace despite her obvious fatigue, and something about her presence made the dusty road feel less lonely than it had in years. The ride to Samuel's cabin took nearly an hour, winding through pine forests and alongside crystal-clear streams. During the journey, they talked quietly about practical matters, what kind of work needed doing, where she would sleep, how meals would be managed. But underneath the practical conversation, Samuel sensed a deeper story, pain that she wasn't ready to share. When they reached his modest log cabin, nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering pines, Samuel felt suddenly self-conscious about his simple home. "It's not much," he said apologetically, "but it's clean and warm." "It's beautiful," she said softly, and he could hear genuine appreciation in her voice. "You can see why God made this place so peaceful." Over the following weeks, Samuel's cabin was transformed. His mysterious housekeeper, who simply asked to be called Grace, brought order and warmth to spaces that had known only utilitarian functionality. She cooked meals that filled the cabin with wonderful aromas, tended a small garden with obvious skill, and somehow made the simple act of coming home at the end of a hard day feel like a gift. But more than the domestic improvements, Grace brought something Samuel hadn't realized he was missing: companionship. They would sit together in the evenings, she mending clothes or preparing vegetables while he whittled or read aloud from books he'd collected over the years. They talked about everything except her past, creating a present that felt rich with possibility. Samuel found himself falling in love not just with the woman beneath the shawl, but with the life they were building together. Grace was intelligent, kind, and possessed a gentle sense of humor that made even difficult days feel manageable. She never removed her head covering even when working around the cabin, but Samuel had stopped noticing. Her character had become more beautiful to him than any physical appearance could ever be. One evening, as autumn painted the mountains in brilliant colors, Samuel gathered his courage to speak the words that had been growing in his heart for weeks. "Grace," he said as they sat together on the cabin's front porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "I need to tell you something." She looked at him with the quiet attention that had become so dear to him. "What is it, Samuel?" "I know we haven't known each other long, and I know you have secrets you're not ready to share, but these past weeks have been the happiest of my life." He paused, gathering his courage. "I've come to love you, not just for what you do, but for who you are. And I was wondering, would you consider becoming my wife?" Grace was quiet for so long that Samuel began to fear he had overstepped, had misread the gentle affection he thought he'd seen growing between them. Finally she spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "Samuel, you don't know who I am. You don't know what I've done or why I need to hide my face from the world. I know you're kind," Samuel said gently. "I know you work hard and care about doing things right. I know you've brought more joy into my life than I ever thought possible. That's all I need to know." Grace stood up from her chair and moved to the porch railing, her back to him. "What if I told you I was someone people would consider damaged? Someone with a past that might bring shame to your name?" "Then I'd tell you that the past is behind us, and what matters is the future we choose to build together." Slowly, Grace reached up and began to unwrap the shawl that had covered her head since the day they met. Samuel's breath caught as he saw her face for the first time, but not for the reason she expected. She was beautiful, with delicate features and kind brown eyes, but Samuel could see the faint scars that marked one side of her face, evidence of some past trauma that had clearly driven her to hide from the world. "My name is Elizabeth Rose Whitmore," she said quietly. "My husband used to beat me until one night when I tried to defend myself and he fell against the fireplace. The town blamed me for his death, said I was a murderer. I've been running ever since, hiding my face because wanted posters with my name are posted in every town." Samuel stood and moved to her side, gently taking her hands in his. "Elizabeth Rose Whitmore," he said softly. "That's the most beautiful name I've ever heard." She looked at him with wonder, tears streaming down her face. "Aren't you afraid? Ashamed to be associated with someone like me? I'm proud to know someone with the courage to defend herself and the strength to survive what you've survived," Samuel replied. "And if you'll have me, I'd be honored to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to hide again." 6 months later, Samuel and Elizabeth were married in the small church in Cedar Falls, with half the town in attendance. The same people who had once whispered about the mysterious woman with the covered face now spoke of Elizabeth Hayes as one of the kindest, most generous souls they'd ever known. Samuel never regretted his decision to approach a stranger in need, to offer help without knowing her story. He had learned that love wasn't about perfect circumstances or flawless pasts, but about choosing to see the good in another person and having the courage to build something beautiful together. Elizabeth never forgot the man who had looked past her shame and seen her worth. In Samuel's eyes, she found not just love, but redemption, and the strength to believe that everyone deserved a second chance at happiness. Sometimes the most important decisions we make aren't based on what we know, but on what we feel in our hearts. And sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin when someone chooses kindness over judgment, hope over fear, and faith in the person someone can become rather than condemnation for who they used to be.